transgressions, to make an end of sin, to make reconciliation for your iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the command to restore and build Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The street shall be built again, and the wall, even in troublesome times. And after the 62 weeks, Messiah shall be cut off, but not for himself, and the people of the Prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. The end of it shall be with a flood, until the end of the war desolates are determined. Then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering. And on the wing of abominations shall be one who makes desolate, even until the consummation which is determined is poured out on the desolate.
That's it. Okay, now there's a lot of information there and you can easily go, wow, there's so much there. So let's just start with verse 24. Okay, so we're not too overboggled in our minds. Verse 24, how many different ways does it talk about sin? How many synonyms or similar words does it use there to talk about sin? The people have sinned. Okay, so mention some of the words. Transgression. Yes. Yes. All right, well, righteousness is a good word, so that's not sin. But the other 3, you're right, transgression, iniquity, sin. So it's repeating the same sort of thing. It's saying, God's saying, I'm going to give you a prophecy, which is a promise. He's saying, because the people of Israel are doing the same thing they've done over and over again, they keep falling away. He says, I'm going to give you time to come back to me as a people. I'm giving you lots of time. And in Bible prophecy, when we look at 70 weeks, it's actually not 70 literal weeks. Because if it was 70 literal weeks, it would just be over a year. And that wouldn't be an incredible thing that God says something's happening in a year. 70 weeks is, when it's looked at in Bible prophecy, it means that it's not literal time. And if we look at it here, we get the principle in the book of Numbers and in the book of Ezekiel that a day equals a year in Bible prophecy. A day equals a year. So when we go back and it says 70 weeks are determined for your people, we look at that and that's not 70 literal weeks, but we go, there's 7 days in a week. 70 by 7 is 490 years. 490 years, right? 70 weeks, 7 days in a week, 70 times 7 is 490. 490 years. God is saying, I'm going to give the people of Israel 490 years worth of chances. Now, we talk about getting a second chance. He's saying you're going to get 490 years worth of chances. It's a long time. 490 years that he says, for you as a nation to come back to me. 490 years to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in righteousness. 490 years. I think that's an incredibly long time. When we look at that, that prophecy actually began, when we look at 490 years, when did it begin? It actually began in the time of Ezra. So it's in 457 BC was the command to rebuild Jerusalem. That was the beginning of the prophecy. So from there, from 457 BC, the prophecy begins, and this is when this time period starts. Okay, and we won't look at all the Bible verses, but you're welcome to find that in Ezra. In fact, if someone has it there, Ezra chapter 7 and verse 10 to 14, we see that the prophecy begins at this time period where they are commanded as a people to go rebuild Jerusalem, rebuild the city. Who has that there? Ezra chapter 7, verses 10 to 14. Someone has that? Anyone? If you'd like to just read it out, please. Chapter 7 and verse 10 to 14. In a nice loud voice so everyone can hear.
And ordinances in Israel. This is a copy of the letter that King Artaxerxes gave Ezra the priest, the scribe, expert in the words of the commandments of the Lord and of his statutes to Israel. Artaxerxes, King of Kings, to Ezra the priest, a scribe of the law of the God of heaven. I issue a decree that all those of the people of Israel are the priests, the Levites in my realm who volunteer to go up to Jerusalem may go with you. And whereas you are being sent by the king and his 7 counselors to inquire concerning Judah and Jerusalem with regard to the law of your God, which is in your hand.
Okay. All right. So the prophecy begins there, 457 BC, and you can check that date out as well if you want to double check it. But there it starts here at this point, and the prophecy is 70 weeks. So we're going to go through it step by step to get to the end of the 490 years. But it starts there, and you think, why God does he give so much time? But God is a God of grace, a God who continues to extend his mercy and continues to say, as a nation, I will give you chance after chance after chance. Don't know how many have you heard of the film Schindler's List? There's a film, there's a book, there's all kinds of information about Oskar Schindler. You know anything about the time of the Holocaust? Oskar Schindler was one person who did everything he could to protect the Jewish people. He helped them when they were being slaughtered, when the Nazis were after them. And he was a very big business owner. And he was at first in the movie, you see it, and he starts off sort of being a bit selfish, really thinking about himself and the profits he's going to make and the money he's just going to spend. But as he sees these people and he sees their suffering and he sees the way that they are being treated, he takes on many Jews as part of his factory and he employs them. And some of them don't have the skills that he needs. Some of them only have one arm, and still he just pretends that they're working even if they're not working. And in the end, he saves 1,200 Jews. But when they thank him for his work, you've got to remember that by association, he was still connected to the Nazis. So he was trying to look like he was on their side while he was helping the Jews. So when the war is coming to an end, he knows he's going to be hunted down. And the Jewish people thank him for everything he's done, and they give him a ring. And inside the ring, it says, he who helps one man has saved the entire world. And he breaks down in tears because he says, but I wasted a lot of money. I saved people, but I could have saved more people. I could have done much more. And he starts to look around and he says, look at my car. That could have been 2 people. This ring that you're giving me, that's the life of another person. And he starts to look around and he sobs because he thinks, I could have done more. I could have saved more. When you think that the capacity for human beings is to have grace and mercy, that even in a man who was fickle at first, there could exist mercy. How can we not see the mercy of God? God is much more merciful and much more gracious than Oskar Schindler. And so when he gives us the prophecy, he's saying, I want to give you people time as a nation. God saves people individually. That's how he does it. But he's saying, as a nation, you have been the chosen people. I want you to come back. Now, if we continue in the prophecy in Daniel 9, there's some beautiful things that are said in that promise. And we'll go quickly. I know our time is sort of running short. But if you go back to chapter 9 there, in this promise, not just a prophecy, but a promise, it says that 70 weeks are decreed, or 490. We said that it started with the command to rebuild Jerusalem. And in verse 25, it says there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. Now that's another way of saying 69 weeks, because 7 plus 62 is 69. So it says the bulk of the prophecy will be all this time will pass. 483 years will pass, it says, until Messiah the Prince. Until the Messiah the Prince publicly comes on the scene. And in 27 AD, again, you can check this with history, but the New Testament shows us that Jesus was baptized at this time, right? He was anointed. This is when the Holy Spirit came down and said, and God the Father said, this is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. This marks the beginning of the public ministry of Jesus. So it's saying here, the Prince will come. The Prince will be seen. The Prince will begin his ministry, right? So verse 24 and verse 25 gives us the majority of the time in prophecy. But it says there that after that, in verse 26, after the 62 weeks, the Messiah shall be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the Prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. The end of it shall be with a flood. Until the end of the war, desolations are determined. He shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. But in the middle of the week, he shall bring an end. He shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering. And on the wing of abomination shall be one who makes desolate, even until the consummation which is determined. So you notice there, when the anointing of Jesus happened was 27 AD, it says that in the final week of this prophecy, or in the final 7 years, it says that in the middle of that, the Messiah would be cut off, which is another way of saying that he would die. In the middle of the week, right? And we look at the ministry of Jesus, and how long did it last for? 3.5 years. Jesus spent exactly 3.5 years on this earth doing ministry, preaching, teaching, healing, sharing the good news of the gospel. Just as it was prophesied, he would be anointed. He would have 3.5 years of ministry. And then it says here, in the middle of that week, he would be cut off. But cut off for who? Cut off for? Who would he die for? Us. Us. He would die for us. He would be cut off for you and me.